Hey, this is Erica from Ever Educating, and this channel is teaching tips, tools, ideas, and resources for new college instructors. We're way into the series at this point where I'm covering one major assignment per video, the big ideas, the small ideas. And at this point, we've covered, papers, secondary research, primary research. We covered more creative ones like adaptations. And this time I wanted to tie basically those two together, right? The creative and the more formal into a multimedia project. And so in this case, this applies across all fields, not just in literature and writing. And it could probably be a heavier assignment weight-wise. So maybe this is 20 to 30%, potentially even more, of their grade, depending on how much you require of them. And the idea here is that rather than just having them write papers and submit those, or do something that's really, really creative, like writing an adaptation, have them create a multimedia project where their research ends up being potentially a podcast, maybe a video, or a website. So I think those probably be the three most common options that students might have skills already in creating them. And the idea here is to literally just have, okay, you're doing a research project, but rather than giving me a 10-page paper, you get to choose. You might do, a 5 to 10 minute video on your topic, or you might do a series of podcast episodes, or you might do a website where you're going to have a certain amount of written text, but also images, videos, audio potentially. And so in this case, the prep is more on the instructor's side, where you're going to have to figure out how to create equity amongst the three types if you offer all three. So if you do want to offer all three, then you have to figure out, okay, I think that having a 5 to 10 minute video is the same as having a 10 minute to 15 minute audio, right, podcast, which is the same as having a website that has 3 different pages with a combination of written text, videos they find or videos they curate that are shorter, right, they don't have to be 5 to 10 minutes, and audio that again they find or they create, again, that can be shorter than the requirements for the podcast. So figuring out what you consider to be the same, right, equitable amongst them would be your biggest challenge here. And I do think that as far as pros and cons goes, pros, this can really interest students who great, I don't have to write another paper, I can actually do something fun. I can create a video, just like I've been doing when I have my, secret YouTube channel or my, TikTok reels. I can create a website, which I've already been doing, on my own. I have always wanted to do a podcast, and now I can see what is required of me to do that. So I think there's a lot of buy-in when you have this more creative opportunity, but there's still the analysis, right? So the work they're doing is still analytical in nature. So it's not just, I'm gonna create podcasts about my opinions about this book or this theorist or this concept in my course. No, you're analyzing it, but rather than in written form, you're doing it by maybe having an individual podcast, or maybe you're interviewing somebody in the field. You're doing an individual video, or maybe you're interviewing somebody in the field, or you're doing some practical application of the concept. You're showing how gravity works in these 3 different ways, and you're recording them and creating the experimental video to show to your instructor. Or you're creating a website where there's 3 pages, and each page has a different approach to studying this concept. So again, the sky's the limit here, but it gives your students a lot of flexibility, a lot of potentially fun, while still being very academic in nature. Now, cons, if you have students who don't have a lot of tech skills, then they're going to struggle, right? They're going to be a lot more work for them if they've never considered creating a video, or never thought of creating a podcast. Websites are okay, I go on them, but I don't make them. So it can be hard. You have to introduce them to free tools. They have to spend the time getting the skills they need. So it can be complicated if you're in a place or with a demographic where tech isn't very common, or using tech in these ways isn't very common. So a bit of it depends on where you're at. But I do think in a lot of places, this is something that would really interest students, and they would have a lot of skills going into it already. And if they didn't, they'd be excited to learn these skills in this project versus having to write, a 10-page paper. And potentially, you can have that option. You can do these 3 multimedia things or write a 10-page paper. And then you have that out for those students who don't want to have that tech aspect to their work. Cons as well is grading these can be hard because, again, you have to be fair to all your students. So figuring out, well, how do you grade the video versus the podcast versus the website, something you have to give some thought to. It could also take a while to grade these because I've had students who go like way above and beyond, and so it's a really robust website. It takes quite a bit of time to see everything. Or they have like so much fun creating the podcast episodes that they create much more than needed. So more power to them, but it obviously gives you more content to need to grade as well. As far as follow-up to this kind of assignment, I do think that there's just an element of let's talk about how all this media you consume is being created. Like, let's talk about the struggles you had creating your video or your podcast or your website. What decisions did you make when you're producing these things? Why did you make those decisions? You know, who did potentially help you do these things? Did you go to YouTube to learn how to create, a YouTube video or a podcast, or the case may be? So I think it can create interesting discussions about our media-heavy society as they're doing the project, but also afterward as well. You might have them share their projects with the class, and then potentially they can respond. Let's say if they're posting it to your class website, then they can watch each other's or listen to each other's or peruse the websites and give them feedback on it. So I do think it could be an interesting community building project if you want to take it that far. So this is multimedia, right? So I do think there's a lot of potential here in any course that you might be teaching. So if you found this video helpful, click like and let me know, and subscribe if you don't want to miss out on any future content. I have quite a few videos in this series already. I'll link those below, and I'll see you next time with a new video.